Don't be so eager to look for the complicated explanation that you overlook the obvious answer. Right? That's my issue with a lot of conspiracy theories. And I recently did a short video about this, and I think some people might have misunderstood what I was saying, because I'm certainly not saying that there aren't conspiracies. I'm certainly not saying that there aren't, secret people with secret agendas doing secret things that, people, if they were to become public knowledge, people would not be pleased with and would not tolerate. That certainly is the case. What I meant is that, and maybe I didn't explain myself well, what I meant was that I think it is tempting to look for the extremely convoluted answer to to what's something, to the problem before us. When we encounter a problem, there's the old cliche of, if you hear hoofbeats, don't picture, don't expect a horse, or don't expect a horse, expect the obvious answer. Don't expect a zebra. Think horse, not zebra, because obviously, and that's dependent on you living in an area where horses are more common than zebras, but most people, I think, live in places like that. So, if something, and then what is the Occam's razor, which is don't needlessly complicate, don't complicate an answer beyond what is necessary. I might be misquoting that. I might be misremembering that, but it's along those lines, and that's the that's the sensible thing. That's the practical thing to do, is to look for the, don't get so hung up on trying to think of the most elaborate, complicated explanation for something that you can. Just think about what realistically what's going on. And so I think this works with conspiracies and with secret agendas and that kind of thing, with deceptions, broadly speaking, because the key of it, I think, and hopefully this makes sense, but the key of it, I think, is that what the deception is often wrapped within another deception. Like, people might be swayed, might be distracted from the real answer to what's going on, because they are fed or sort of led to a more complicated answer, more complicated, but also a more neat explanation for something that strikes people as, oh yes, that explains everything, and that can be really attractive and really appealing to people. But that in and of itself may be a misdirection, and maybe a deception, because maybe there is a deception going on, but maybe it is simpler than it may seem. Maybe it is a simpler sort of trick that's being played. Maybe it's not the convoluted explanation that explains everything and wraps everything up in a neat bow. Maybe it's the simpler explanation that's messier and that doesn't explain everything. Hopefully that makes sense. I guess it's like I don't know. Someone could swindle you or something. Like they could swindle you out of some money. They could fleece you, and then they could tell you, I think it was this person who you don't like. I think they did it. And then because you are just naturally sort of, you don't like this person, you hate this other person, so you're it's like, oh, that there's kind of a natural impulse to grasp at that explanation, because it satisfies two birds with one stone. Because it's like, oh, I always hated that guy. That makes perfect sense to me that he did that, because I always hated him for these other reasons. So it's a very appealing idea to say, yes, he's the one who screwed me over. It's not it's not the guy who led me to think in that direction. It was this other guy who I've always hated. He did it. And even if the logistics of making that connection are more complicated than just realizing, hey, I think it was you. You're the one I found standing in my open vault, or looking through my open wallet or whatever, and then this person, the actual guilty party, says, oh no, I just found it, but I saw your brother. Not your brother. I saw the guy you hate. I saw him running away. And then it's tempting to on some level to think think it was the guy that you already had an issue with, because then it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm kind of prejudiced to think it was that guy, because I'm just looking for any reason to get him, to get revenge on him. And I think a lot of things are like that. People get I don't know, I think in government, right? Often the government screws people over, various people, various reasons, various means. They screw people over, and then they try to deflect from just people pointing the finger at them and then their corruption, and they say, oh no, it's actually this vast, this, and not necessarily a conspiracy, but they say it's like, oh, it's this whole web of complicated economic reasons and complicated political reason. It's like, oh, it's all these people who are against me, like I'm the innocent victim here. And it's like, no, the simple explanation, the reality is just that you screwed us over. And I think people want the bigger explanation. They want the explanation that kind of titillates their imagination more and satisfies their pre-existing prejudices, or their pre-existing view of who's good and who's bad and who's doing what, and who you should be aggrieved at. It's easy to kind of misdirect people, to take advantage of people, and then point the finger at someone they already don't like, a group of people they don't like, an individual they don't like, whatever, a type of person they don't like, point the finger at them and then say, yeah, it was that, hey, it was them, because that's just what people are willing to believe, that they want to believe that there's a bigger explanation, when in reality I think it is sometimes there are big conspiracies, that's true. Sometimes there are grand conspiracies, definitely, but more often than not, the conspiracy, the deception, the fraud is it's a group of people. It can be a group of people, not necessarily like a vast, all-powerful group. It's more like a mafia kind of situation, where it's this powerful group, but they're kind of powerful in their little quadrant of the world, and they might work with other powerful mafia type groups. They might work with they might cooperate, but ultimately it's all these like little political and economic warlords and that kind of thing who have their scams and their schemes, and they have what they're working on, and they're taking advantage of the people who live in their sphere of influence. And it's tempting to connect all these different mafias, all these different conspirators under one huge umbrella, and that's not always the case. Sometimes there are global conspiracies. Sometimes there are, definitely. I mean, what was the Cold War, if not one gigantic, conspiracy. I mean, but not necessarily a unified conspiracy, but just a huge, huge conspiracy being run on a global stage. But most of the time, it's people running smaller schemes and deceptions, and they try to point the finger at more lurid things, more lurid targets that stimulate the imagination and make people want to believe it because it's entertaining and it's interesting, and it deflects from the people who are right in front of you, who are stealing from you, who are betraying you, who are taking advantage of you in one way or another. They can point the finger at people, real or imagined, higher up and with greater influence, and say, it's not me, it's them. And often it works, because then people get distracted by these bigger these, these more powerful people, and these bigger alleged conspiracies, these supposed conspiracies. It's like, I don't know, I was talking about, in other videos, talking about the allegations of statewide corruption in Minnesota, of massive fraud, and it's a lot of that kind of thing, where it's like this, this group who's in charge of this part of the world, this area, this, that has this sphere of influence, and they fleece the people in that sphere of influence, and they manipulate them, and they take advantage of them. And they're not necessarily these people aren't necessarily getting their marching orders from an underground bunker somewhere in the world who's telling them to do all these things. Maybe sometimes they are. I mean, I'm open to that possibility. I just have not observed that to ever have been the case. Well, of course, there are global conspiracies. That's certainly true. It would be naive to think otherwise, but don't be distracted from the smaller conspiracies that are on your doorstep, that are aiming to rob you personally, or to do you harm personally. Don't get distracted when they try to tell you that it's not their fault. It's this huge global conspiracy that's screwing you over, that's keeping you down. And it's like, well, I think you're the one doing it. I think you're the one, let's be honest. Let's be honest, I see you doing it right in front of me. I'm not going to get distracted that easily. I see you doing it right here and right now. Don't tell me that it's, it's actually this other group of people who I've never seen, It's that's probably a deception. Most of the time it's probably a deception. If someone seems guilty of something like that, I mean, if you catch someone with their hand in your pocket, then they're probably the, and then what if it was that you catch someone with their hand in your pocket, and then they tell you, oh, don't worry, I'm just shadowing you and keeping your wallet safe. There's pickpockets around. There's this huge gang of pickpockets who are roaming the city. I'm keeping you safe. I'm doing you a favor. I think the reasonable thing in that situation is to say, well, no, you're obviously the one who's trying to steal from me. I caught you with your hand in my pocket. You're obviously the one. I'm not going to get distracted so easily. You're obviously the one who's trying to steal from me. You can point your finger at this supposed massive Charles Dickens gang of pickpockets who are roaming the city in their hundreds, and you're saying you're protecting me, and that's why I caught you doing this thing. But obviously that's there's a less than 1% chance that's true. That's obviously fake. That's obviously a deception. It's obviously just trying to confuse me. So this pickpocket, the actual pickpocket, can keep stealing from me.